The Nintendo Switch has received a plethora of variety and styles of games, from incredible big first-party titles to awesome indie games and so much more. But recently in a live stream, I was talking with my audience and we were discussing the best ports on the Nintendo Switch, because it's always a little bit of a mixed bag what you're going to get, and people brought up a variety of different games and we had a lot of different opinions. And even in my own videos, I've talked about Western AAA games and the best third-party Japanese games, but in this video and countdown for the Nintendo Switch, I wanted to go over the top 25 best AAA Nintendo Switch ports, combining what I love, the Japanese games out there, with the Western titles and kind of putting them together to see what's the best of the best. Now, this list encompasses many different factors that is going to be subjective: the quality of the game, the content that's brought over, the image quality, the resolution, the timing, the impact, everything that it did overall. So there's probably going to be some high-end or AAA games that you love that doesn't make my top 25, and that's okay. You can let me know what your favorite high-end AAA ports are to the Nintendo Switch. Now, another factor here, guys, is that we're not putting in games like, let's say, Dragon Quest XI-S, which was not a port. It was specifically built for the Nintendo Switch in Unreal Engine or other games like that. So keep that in mind. But before we get into it, what's good, everyone? OJ here. Welcome back to another video. Please make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you are someone new, and click that notification bell, because we have a bunch of incredible 2024 videos lined up and planned. Now let's go ahead and jump right into number 25, and that is Warframe on the Nintendo Switch. And this game would be higher if the frame rate and the image quality and the resolution all held up to the quality of the game originally, where it's coming from. That's one of the big things, is that how did it look before and then what happened when it came to the Nintendo Switch. And this game definitely is a lot better from a technical perspective on other platforms, but Warframe is still really good. It's good enough to make it into 25 on my list because of the impressiveness of what they were able to do. This is a live service style of game, but you can play it offline, you can play it single player. It's got all the multiplayer options, suite, everything that's available on Microsoft, Sony, PC. It's available on the Nintendo Switch. That includes the expansions, and I was surprised on how good it looked. And when you play it, yes, there's some frame rate dips, there's some issues, but overall it feels pretty good to play. It's not like there's a ton of delay, lag, or input latency with the controls. Overall, I had a blast with Warframe on the Switch, and that's why it makes it number 25 on the list. Next up at number 24, No Man's Sky, another game that launched with some issues on the Nintendo Switch, but competent enough considering the style of game. But since the launch of the game, they've actually rolled out a number of patches that have made it a lot better. It loads faster, it's more stable when it comes to the frame rate. You've got a lot, pretty much all of the content that's available on Microsoft and Sony systems is available on the Nintendo Switch, and that is really impressive considering how old this game is. And if you look at the image quality of it and compare it to the other systems, it's also pretty comparable. Now, the frame rate, 30 frames, you're not going to get that 60 frames that you can get on other platforms, but overall, I think when you're playing through No Man's Sky on the Switch, it's a pretty impressive experience, especially if you're playing it on a Nintendo Switch OLED. It holds up really well that way, and you don't mind necessarily some of the dips and things that happen, but because of those, I have to put it a bit lower. I also think that the procedurally generated stuff, it's cool, but obviously it's one of those things to where it's not going to be as impactful as some of the other games that we're going to get to on this list, but I think that it's good enough to make it to number 24 right here. Next up at number 23, Borderlands Legendary Collection. This is on here simply because of the amount of work that they had to do to put it all into one package, because remember, these are a bunch of games with every single piece of content. Everything's intact, from the PlayStation and Xbox versions, bringing it over to the Switch. The graphics in terms of the resolution, 1080p, 30 frames per second, so it holds it pretty steady. You don't get that 60 like you can get on some of the other enhanced versions of the games on Microsoft and Sony systems, but I think that the port is really well done. It still retains the 4-player online for the versions, which is the reason why I don't have Borderlands 3 on this list, is that it does not retain that 4 players, and some of the resolution and the frame rate is a bit more off. I think that Borderlands, the Legendary Collection, is a much better package for Borderlands fans on the Nintendo Switch. If you want that portable Borderlands experience, looking sharp and good and running relatively well, Borderlands Legendary Collection is probably the best option if you don't have like a Steam Deck for portable play or some type of PC handheld. So this game to me kind of blew me away when I first saw it. I was a huge Borderlands fan back in the PS3 era, Xbox 360, kind of fell off of the game, got kind of tired of the loop of just constantly with the guns and all of that. But when I did play it back then, I was blown away by how awesome it was on the Nintendo Switch and all of the content that's there. I think that's the biggest thing, is the fact that they didn't compromise anything when it comes down to it. There's so much content here, and it holds up in the image quality, the resolution, the frame rate for the most part. Everything is right there. So Borderlands Legendary Collection had to make it to number 23 on the list. Next up at number 22, Crash Bandicoot N. Sane Trilogy. And I honestly wanted to put this game higher, but there's a few problems, especially when you start analyzing it compared to some of the other enhanced versions of the game from that base 2017 PlayStation 4 version. There is a bit more input delay that I noticed on some of the other versions, and also was confirmed when I went and looked at what Digital Foundry was saying, because I do have the game on Xbox One X or Xbox Series. I played it backwards compatible, and it's super smooth, super nice on there. All 30 frames just because of how the way the game works and everything, but some of the input delay feels a bit more sluggish on here, which is very unfortunate. Load times are really good. Image quality is really good. Pretty much everything is up there but that. But for a blisteringly difficult platformer, you kind of need that response timing, and it's there. Don't get me wrong. Most of you guys probably won't even notice it at all. But when you're comparing the best Nintendo Switch ports, the ones that did the best job of porting over what was happening, that input delay or that input response timing not being as good absolutely is a couple dings on an overall great package. If you look at the content, everything's there. Crash 1, Crash 2, Crash 3, graphics, everything's super cool. And if you're playing a portable, once again, just like many games on this list, I mean, you might just ignore any type of issue that it has because it's so beautiful and runs well enough. Now, there are some dips as well, though. It doesn't hold that steady 30 frames per second. And once again, in a really difficult platformer, you have a bit of input delay, you have some frame skips, some frame delays here and there. That's going to make for an experience that's not quite the best type of port, but still impressive overall. Crash Bandicoot N. Sane Trilogy, still number 22 on the list. Number 21, Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition. Xenoblade makes it to number 21 on the list because that Wii game, it was a bit of a mess. Graphically, they were going on some of the most underpowered hardware, right? When it comes down to the 7th generation, the most underpowered hardware out of all of them. I think that what they were able to do to kind of remake the faces, remake the hands, and bring over that world, considering the code and everything that Xenoblade 1 was, I think was very impressive. Now, the reason why it's not higher is because it could have done a bit better job. They cleaned up the frame rate. There was definitely frame rate problems on the Wii, and it's been cleaned up for the most part, especially in the forest area of the game. However, resolution necessarily isn't the best overall when it comes to portable play. Docked isn't too bad, but I would have liked to see it a bit cleaner. And I know that, yes, it doesn't have to be 60 frames per second, but if they could have got that to 60 frames, that would have been really good considering it's a Wii game. So I do think that Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition is a game that, while it's very good, there's definitely a lot of great things that I like what they brought over in terms of how good the port was. It is a fantastic port. It could have been higher if they did clean up a couple of those other things when it comes down to it. But if you're looking at the content in the game, you're looking at what's been brought over and what's been added, it's absolutely excellent. It's superb. It's a ton of fun. There's nice little tweaks and additions. Plus you get that whole extra content that was never released, that was cut from the original game with the Bionis shoulder. You get all of that in Future Connected, which has major implications in future Xeno games. So I love all of that, which is why to me it makes it one of the best ports being brought over to the Nintendo Switch. All right, moving into number 20, we've got Valkyria Chronicles and Valkyria Chronicles 4. These games are not bundled together, but I will be bundling them together because this is my list and my rules, and these games will be bundled together. They're both phenomenal. These are not native Nintendo Switch games. Valkyria Chronicles, originally from the PlayStation 3, being brought over to PS4. This is the PS4 version of the game. Same goes for Valkyria Chronicles 4. Pretty sure the main lead version of the game is the PlayStation 4 version of the game, and it is phenomenal on the Nintendo Switch. Resolution, frame rate, image quality, graphics, everything is all set. It feels like it's the PlayStation 4 version of the game. It looks great, it runs great, it has everything the other versions had. Now, they all dual launched all together, but yes, this is a port of the game, and it's a high-end game as well. People don't realize how good or expensive Valkyria Chronicles is to produce, which is why Sega's been a bit spotty on releasing the games, considering the sales aren't necessarily up to what they would get in terms of like return on investment, ROI. It's just not there. These games are pricey. There's a lot of dialogue, there's a lot of characters, there's a lot of content, there's a lot of things like with the graphics and what they do, the music. There's so many things that need to be put together for it, but it just doesn't necessarily do as well as Sega would like. But the quality of the game is unmistakable, undeniable when it comes to Valkyria Chronicles and Valkyria Chronicles 4. I think that it's easily one of the best Nintendo Switch ports over, and honestly, it could be way higher on this list. It was just something that I already expected and anticipated, already played a number of times. It's still really good, still super, super good. If you haven't played Valkyria Chronicles and Valkyria Chronicles 4, I highly suggest doing it on the Nintendo Switch, on the OLED, on your TV. It just looks beautiful with the watercolors and paint and everything. I was very impressed with the quality of the games. Easily one of the best strategy RPGs ever made, in my opinion. That's why it makes it number 20 on my list. Number 19, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1+2. Now let's talk about this Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1+2, because I think that this high-end or AAA type of port, right? Tony Hawk is kind of a fringe on that line, but back in the day, Tony Hawk 1, Tony Hawk 2, those were the epitome of high-end, high-quality games on the PlayStation 1, on the PlayStation systems, on N64 as well, the port, and that port wasn't necessarily good, the music and all of that, but I think that they've done a great job of bringing over Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2, the HD versions. The only issue would be the halving of the frame rate. If this ran at 60 frames per second like the Xbox and PlayStation version, I think that it would be a lot higher up, because the online play added in is incredible. The stages, the music, the characters, the content, all of this stuff is really good, and Tony Hawk revolutionized the industry. This was the game. I know it's not really as big anymore, and they still sell millions of copies. Heck, I think even the Switch version has sold over 1 million copies by itself, but it's not the impact that it used to have, like the game of the year style impact. Tony Hawk just doesn't have that anymore, but I still feel that Tony Hawk Pro Skater 1 and 2, in terms of the port quality over on the Nintendo Switch, is just incredible and absolutely deserves its number 19 spot on the list. Coming in at number 18, The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword HD. And this game, it's a Wii title being ported over from that system. There was no other HD versions of the game. And although there was some controversy with the amiibo and some of the other things and the price of the game, the quality of the port and how high end from a previous AAA Wii game over to the Nintendo Switch cannot be denied. This is easily one of Nintendo's best jobs bringing over a game. The 1080p resolution, in addition to the 60 frames per second, was a first for a Zelda console game. There had been no other Zelda home console games officially from Nintendo that ran at 1080p 60 frames per second, and this was the first one. But they also retextured a few different things. They cleaned it up. They added a bunch of quality of life features. It has everything the Nintendo Wii version has, and then some. They've got the brand new controls. You can play with the motion controls with the Joy-Cons. You can play with a normal Pro controller. You can play portable on your Nintendo Switch Lite. You've still got the aiming with the gyro. There's so many things that enhance this experience over the original that just makes it way better to play overall when it comes to the quality of life features. This is exactly how a port should be when bringing it over from another system. It's a little bit lower on the list because it's not as impressive since it is a Wii game compared to some of these other big PS3, PS4 games, or even Wii U titles, but I still feel that it deserves some kudos considering some people felt that it would be 30 frames per second, or it might not be as good, or the resolution might not be there. Some people were stating that they didn't do anything to the game graphically, but they've cleaned up the image quality, obviously doubled the frame rate, resolution is a lot higher as well, and other little things here and there to make it a clean experience, whether you're playing it on a Nintendo Switch OLED, on your TV, on a Switch Lite, doesn't really matter. The game looks good on all aspects, in addition to being a solid version of the game. So that's the reason why it's number 18 on my list. Number 17, Crysis 3 Remastered. Now, I'm not a big first-person shooter guy, and some of you guys might even scoff at me having Crysis over Doom and Doom Eternal. Now, yes, those games are incredibly impressive in terms of what they were able to do from a graphical standpoint. Honestly, from just porting it over, those are very impressive. But the end results in terms of what the game looked like before on Xbox and PlayStation, and considering how it looks on the Nintendo Switch, there is such a stark difference between the ports. You can tell when that Nintendo Switch version is being played on Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal. To me, Crysis 3 Remastered looks far better in terms of the port job from where it came from, whether that's on Xbox or PlayStation, whatever the case is. Graphically, it holds up a lot better. It seems a lot more clear, easier to play, and less nausea-inducing when it comes to the speed of the game compared to what Doom is about, and having to have that 60 frames per second because of the pace and style of the game. This is highly subjective, and I know a lot of people are going to disagree, but at the same time, I spent a lot of time myself going through and playing all of these games, and even looking at other opinions when it comes down to the image, Digital Foundry, some of the things there. And yeah, I have to agree, my eyes saw what I saw when I was playing the game and testing it, in addition to what they're talking about as well. And to me, Crysis 3 Remastered is easily one of the best looking and best big impossible style type of ports, even though I think it's like, what, a PS3 360 game or whatever the case is. But either way, to me, it holds up way better in comparison to the port of the systems that it's coming from. If you like first-person shooters, it's all good in that respect as well. Not the greatest shooter out there. Doom and Doom Eternal might be better, but at the same time, I think that it deserves this 17th spot considering how good it looks and considering how good it runs as well, all things considered. Number 16, Okami HD. This is a really interesting game to put because I've had Okami HD in so many of my lists, but what makes this a fantastic port of the game is that a lot of the visual flair, a lot of the aliasing, a lot of the different things that they do to clean up the image over the PlayStation 3 version, and of course enhanced greatly above the Wii version and the PlayStation 2 version, are all present here on the Nintendo Switch. Unfortunately, the 30 frames per second is a bit of a hindrance, especially if you're bringing a game over from the 6th generation of systems, but it's like that on all systems because there is a problem with the way that the game was built. Even PC modders, maybe they've done it at this point, but back then they were having trouble getting it to be 60 frames per second, and it's 30 frames per second on Xbox and PlayStation as well. So that's the only issue there. Outside of that, it runs beautifully on the Nintendo Switch, maybe a dip or two here and there, but overall it runs really good. It's an incredible game, and everything that the game has, because there isn't really any DLC or anything extra, everything came packed in, the Platinum Games staple, everything's already packed in. All the content, all the replay value, everything's all right there. That is all intact on the Nintendo Switch. They've even added some cool stuff, kind of from like the Wii version with the Wii Remote and kind of drawing the different types of battle attacks and everything. That's available on the Nintendo Switch via the touchscreen in portable mode. So they've kind of even added in an extra little thing that you can't get on other systems with the HD version of the game. That makes it a spectacular port, and those are the little things to me. You gotta have the image quality, you gotta have the frame rate, you gotta have the resolution, you have to have all of that to be a great port. It's gotta be somewhat similar to the source material where you're getting it from, but then also going above and beyond and adding in some of those extra things that you didn't really have to add, but they did it anyway, to me makes an even better port as well. So that's the reason why Okami HD is number 16 on the list. Number 15, The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. Now, this will probably be a little bit controversial, and I agree, this could be higher as well. But if you take into account at launch, yes, not all these games ran perfect, and some of them do run better after launch. It is dependent on when you play it, based off of maybe how you'll feel. I played this game right at launch, and yes, it's impressive. The graphics are very comparable. It's the remastered version like the PS4. It looks very comparable to the PS4 version of the game, which is absolutely good, which is why it leapfrogged a lot of these other games that we're talking about here. The content is pretty much all there overall. It's got all the different DLC packs and everything. It looks good. It runs okay, but the bugs, the glitches, the problems, all of that was pretty much retained on the Nintendo Switch version. Now, maybe it's not as egregious. Obviously, the frame rate is a lot better than the PS3 and 360, but we're going off the PS4 version because that's what this version is. And I guess the source material has bugs and glitches as well, but that's not necessarily the best type of port. If you port over something, that is your opportunity to fix a lot of those things or potentially do that. And while it's done a little bit and it's going to be random, Skyrim has like random bugs and glitches for different people. Sometimes things happen there or whatever. There were some issues when I played the game. Not 100%, not like it was everything, but there were some issues and the frame rate wasn't always there, especially if you're fighting like a dragon or something like that. So while I do think that it's an impressive port, considering the scope and scale of Skyrim, it's still an Xbox 360 game that was remastered, put on PS4 and Xbox One, and they ported that over to Nintendo Switch. It's impressive. It looks good, but there's still some issues there that keep it from being in that upper echelon, in my opinion. But it gets as high as it does because of everything that it does, because of how it looks. I think the resolution is 900p or something like that, so pretty good. 720p portable, not bad at all, especially for 2017 when the game came out. But it got dinged a little bit for some of the frame rate and some of the other things overall. That's why it's number 15 on the list. Number 14, Portal Companion Collection. Now, this could absolutely be higher. Once again, I think some of you guys might have it higher. This is one of the best rated games on the Nintendo Switch, hands down. And the reason why it's not quite as high as some of these others is because there are some frame rate issues. It's 60 frames, which is great. It targets 60 and most of the time it'll run that. But when you shoot a portal and when something's kind of happening at times, or when you move the camera quick, there are some frame rate issues. In this type of game, it's not as big of a deal. It's not intense combat. You're just shooting portals and you're just solving puzzles. So it's not that big of a deal, but you're going to be shooting those portals a lot and going through them a lot, so you might feel that frame rate. And on top of it, if you look at what this game does, like the source material in terms of where you're getting from, the fact that it looks as good as it does, it's very comparable to, I think, even the Steam Deck version of the game, so I had to bump it up. Now, in terms of quality wise, this is not my style of game, so the fact that it's even on here is awesome. I think this is the first time that I've even put Portal on any list, but as I went through and I was playing different types of games and looking and researching, Portal kept on coming up as one of the best Nintendo Switch ports from like a AAA or super high quality standpoint. So of course I had to check it out myself, and yeah, it's still really good. Not necessarily my style, a bit simplistic in terms of the style of game that it is. It's not like it's this massive open world game like Skyrim or some of these other games that I'm talking about, which maybe if it was and it did everything that it did, I'd put it up higher. But overall, you still got to give it up for this game and what they were able to do. They did get some outside help to make sure that they can get it done, but whatever they did, they optimized it like crazy for the Nintendo Switch and that NVIDIA Tegra X1. So yeah, absolutely. Portal Companion Collection, number 14 on the list. Number 13, Dragon Ball FighterZ. Easily one of the best, if not the best, pure traditional 2D fighting game on the Nintendo Switch. Very unfortunate that this game doesn't have the rollback netcode update that Xbox and PlayStation are getting, but those didn't have it at launch either. And this game is a little bit later part. I think it came out about a year or so afterwards. And image-wise, quality-wise, it's right there. It looks sharp, it looks good, it plays good. There's been some updates to help out with the frame rate, but it's not perfect overall. And for a fighting game, you definitely want that to be perfect. Now, you probably won't notice a lot of it. A lot of it does come during certain super attacks and everything. You might see a little bit of slowdown here or there. Most of the time during the actual gameplay, it's solid, and the gameplay is great in this game. I never got super hardcore into it, but I played the beta test. I have the game itself. I definitely played quite a bit of it. I played the single player campaign, and that ran really good for the most part. There wasn't really any issues that I could detect. And if you look at the content, it's got pretty much everything. There's not really anything that it's missing. It's got all the different DLC packs. It's ported over all the different stuff that's in there, all the updates, the online features. All of that is intact on the Switch. And that's one of the big reasons why it's as high up as it is. It's incredibly important to make sure that Switch owners get all of the content that is available on the other platforms for it to truly be one of the best high-end AAA style of ports. And Dragon Ball FighterZ is absolutely that. That's why it's number 13 on my list. Number 12. Diablo 3 Eternal Collection. Very interesting game, and I think a lot of you guys probably didn't have this game on your list, but let me tell you right now, this game is a fantastic conversion over from Xbox and PlayStation. It runs at a good frame rate. It's got everything the other versions got, all of the seasons, all of the added stuff like the dodge rolls, all the different classes, all the different upgrades, everything they've put into it, bam, pretty much right there on cartridge, which is also really good. If you have the physical edition, everything's on cartridge. There are some updated stuff, but everything's right there. That's the sign of great optimization. That's the sign of a good quality port. The music sounds pretty much comparable. The image quality is right there. The frame rate can tank a bit if you're playing multiplayer and somebody's just doing crazy types of magic and everything on screen. But for the most part, if you're just playing a standard game, you're playing by yourself, even if you're playing with your friends and it's the normal amount of enemies on screen and magic and attacks happening, it's going to be a rock solid 60 frames per second with barely any types of dips. That is the sign of a high quality AAA style of port, to where you're playing that and you're like, you know what? I'm not really losing too much playing it on the Nintendo Switch because I'm still playing it in that great frame rate. I'm still playing it with all the great content that's in there. And I can take this version of the game anywhere that I want very easily. I can play with the Joy-Cons. I can play tabletop mode, whatever the case is, however you want to play the game, using the Pro Controller, playing on your TV, switch back and forth, however it is. And that's once again one of the cool things, and why if you have that high-end AAA style of port, it really stands out and people are willing to buy it for more than what you can get it on other systems, or buy it again for the Nintendo Switch experience. I know I did. I had already purchased Diablo 3 multiple times, but I had to pick it up again considering how awesome the port is on the Nintendo Switch. So Diablo 3 Eternal Collection with that awesome Ganondorf costume and all that you can do in there is number 12 on the list. Number 11, BioShock The Collection. A lot of people don't talk about this game because the file size is just insane. It's not a real physical game. You have the downloading, but let me tell you guys something right now. This is easily one of the best AAA style of ports. BioShock is great. It looks fantastic. It runs better than what it did on the Xbox 360. Now, this is the PS4 and Xbox One version being brought over. 30 frames per second across the board with these games. BioShock, BioShock 2, BioShock Infinite. But I was surprised, especially with BioShock Infinite, on how awesome the game looked and it ran. There are some dips here and there, maybe some frame pacing problems, but for the most part, everything is so solid and stable and it looks good. Now, I played BioShock Infinite. I played that on my PC. At the time, I had a strong PC and everything. I played it on there. And yeah, you can see some differences, obviously, if you play on a high-end PC. But overall, the comparison isn't that far off. If you look at BioShock Infinite and what they were able to do with the resolution and the frame rate and everything with the Nintendo Switch version of that, I was very impressed. I did not play BioShock 2, but I've seen videos on there on the Switch version of BioShock 2. Looks good. BioShock 1 looks incredible. Still awesome atmosphere. These were high-end AAA games when they released on the Xbox 360, and you can play them anywhere. I think the portable aspect of BioShock Infinite is such a cool thing. Even BioShock, having those type of games portable, and this was well before, you know, when it comes to Steam Deck and that was getting rolling. And this is something that you can just play natively right there on your Nintendo Switch, is awesome, especially considering you can do it on a Switch Lite, considering what BioShock is and graphically and everything. It's awesome. BioShock doesn't have many flaws outside of some of the stuff that I talked about, with a little bit of the frame pacing, the physical version not being all on the cartridge and things like that because of the huge file size. But I think that that file size was necessary in order to retain the quality of the game overall with the sound and the audio, because all that plays a part into it. So BioShock, the collection, 3 games, 3 awesome ports. All right, guys, we are in the top 10. Let's start off with Bayonetta 1 and 2 on the Nintendo Switch. This is a fantastic port over from the Wii U, Xbox 360, whatever you want to say there. And what I like about these games is that it was actually improved upon the Wii U release. Now, the Nintendo Switch is always seen optically to not be that much stronger than what we've got previously with the 7th generation and with the Nintendo Wii U in that 8th generation. However, they did improve the release. Yes, resolution still about the same 720p across the board, but frame rate wise, it's actually pretty good and better than what we got. Still not that perfect locked 60 frames per second that we'd love to see, but still much better than what it was before from the Wii U. Now you combine that with one of the best games period when it comes to a quality standpoint, from a graphic standpoint, one of the best looking Wii U and even Xbox 360 games before that with Bayonetta 1, or even Wii U games with Bayonetta 1 on there. I think that you have a great port of the game, and everything is still intact. You still have that online multiplayer from Bayonetta 2. They did not shut that down, which I thought maybe they would shut that down from the Wii U version. It's not. You can still go out there and play it if you want to. You've still got all the content that was added in from the Wii U versions that Nintendo had. Nothing was censored or taken out or stripped back. All of that is still on there, and it looks great. Even if you're playing on portable mode, whether you're playing docked, the frame rate is still solid and feels great to play. Input delay wise, I think it feels a bit better to play docked and portable mode than it did on the Wii U, for me at least. So Bayonetta 1 and 2, just them being awesome games, them being not necessarily the most graphically demanding games, but still games that looked great and have a lot of things going on with the speed of the combat, the different AI and enemies. I think it was impressive in terms of what they were able to do that early onto the Nintendo Switch's life, getting both of those games in that double pack. Quality of the game, quality of the release, how it looks, how it plays, all factored in. Bayonetta makes the number 10 on the list. Coming in at number 9, might be shocking some of you guys, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. And the reason why this game is not higher up on the list, game-wise, just how good the game is, yeah, easily could be number 1 for me. But once again, we're factoring so many different things for high-end AAA ports, and Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild at launch was not something that was great. Now, it was better than the Wii U version. Don't get me wrong. It was better as a game in terms of the frame rate and everything, but there was still some issues. There was some problems with glitches. There was some problems potentially crashing that I know I had. Now, they did patch it up. It's been patched up, and many other games on this list got patches, but I think that it's still a bit rougher overall than some of the other games on this list that are in front of it, and that's the reason why it's there. But still, as a port from the Wii U on a system that Nintendo is still figuring out, I think that it was beautiful. Like, once again, it ran better, it looked better than the Wii U version of the game, and that was awesome to see, because obviously the Wii U version has some issues, even more issues than the Nintendo Switch version did. The quality of the game really carries it here, but for the scope and scale wise, this is bigger from a landmass, from a size, than pretty much every game on this list, and you've got to give Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild credit for that. What it was able to do with its physics, its mechanics, all of that takes a toll. CPU, GPU, whatever the case is, all that takes a toll, and Breath of the Wild is unmatched when it comes to that. Now, if it had a locked in frame rate, maybe it was 1080p locked in and all that, absolutely would be higher on my list, because the game quality, the physics, the mechanics, all that stuff is just way up there. But there was just some problems with it at launch, and there was some other technical issues here and there that you necessarily didn't expect from a Nintendo game like that. But I understand, considering everything that Breath of the Wild had to do, the time that they were under to get that game ported over for the Switch launch, completely understand. But still, 9 is not bad, and I'm pretty sure some of you guys will be like, it's higher than that. And yeah, I think from a gameplay perspective, obviously it is, but from everything overall, there was definitely some ports that I thought were a little bit more impressive in terms of the conversion over what they did. So I'm gonna have to give it number 9 on my list. Number 8, Red Dead Redemption plus Undead Nightmare. This was interesting because nobody expected this game to even come over to the Nintendo Switch, but even on top of that, nobody actually expected for it to be on par, at least at launch, with the PlayStation 4 version of the game. But it's right there in terms of image quality. The initial frame rate, they got to update for its 60 frames, but the initial 30 frames pretty much locked in most of the time. It runs stable and set at that 1080p resolution. Now, this is a Xbox 360/PS3 game, but what they were able to do to bring over that version of the game and have it look and run as good as it does, much better than what we got on the Xbox 360, and on par at launch with what the Xbox One or the PS4 version is fantastic. And the game itself is expansive, it's huge, it's got all sorts of stuff that's happening. Yes, there's a lot of empty open countryside, and that works to its advantage, but at the same time, if you were to tell people, okay, Red Dead Redemption plus Undead Nightmare is coming, would it have barely any frame rate drops? Would it be 1080p locked in and easily be one of the best running open world games on the Switch? People will be like, not so sure, after the Grand Theft Auto disaster, which is PlayStation 2 games, right? So if you're looking at that, I think people would have been very skeptical, but no, it was completely different. The quality of the port is very good. The resolution is clean. The image quality is good, and you're getting a fantastic game with tons of content, all ported over wholesale. Nothing was missing from that DLC, from that game. Red Dead Redemption plus Undead Nightmare, easily a top 10 Nintendo Switch AAA high-end port. Coming in at number 7, Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, and do not scoff at this, guys. This game is fantastic. The port, although it was poised as it's a meaningless full price port, and yes, I understand the criticisms, but guys, the port is way better. You gotta look at it from someone who's played the originals like crazy on the Wii U. The loading times, the image quality, the ease of play, and almost everything is improved in this game. It's nothing that's so drastic that's going to pop out and say, oh my gosh, yes, that's so much better, like we've seen with some of these other games. But you're taking a game that's already really good, looks good, runs good, everything is good, and you're making it even better here across the board. The big thing for me is the load times. The load times were noticeably long on the Wii U. I remember saying, man, these load times take forever, and on the Nintendo Switch, they're so much faster for easy platforming, pick up and play. I love that. The resolution is increased from 720p to 1080p. The ease of play, so if you're playing with someone who's maybe not as good in the game, little nephew, little niece, or if maybe you suck at the game yourself, you do have the Funky Kong mode, the Funky Kong in there in order to help out. And that is big for people when it comes to accessibility and just being able to beat the game, because this is a hard game. So it addresses many things that people had a problem. It makes the game run better, it looks cleaner, and it's a phenomenal game. You have to remember the quality of the game in terms of it being a high-end AAA style of game. It's all there. Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze is so good on the Nintendo Switch, and I think that's why it did incredibly well even as a higher priced Wii U port being brought over, right? So to me, Donkey Kong absolutely deserves that number 7 spot on the list. Number 6, Super Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury. This one had a case for the top spot, and yes, it's a little bit of new, not necessarily port, because they made a whole new section or game added in on there, but I think that overall the whole package of what you get is very impressive. It's unexpected. You get the same game, right? Same Super Mario 3D World. Of course, they increased the resolution to 1080p. They got rid of all the gimmicky Wii U gamepad stuff that you don't need, to which it does just play better. Obviously, having the ability to have all the different characters, that's still all intact. All the content is intact plus added on, but they've also done something that went above and beyond what people even thought they would do, and that's adding in online multiplayer. If you want to play with your friends, they added that in. That's probably, some people would say, is the most un-Nintendo thing to do, considering how people felt about Nintendo's stance on multiplayer, and still do to some degree, and how they added that into a game. And the online multiplayer, if you have good connections, it works well enough. It's still not ideal, and it's definitely not better than playing local, but if you've got fast connections, it plays good. I tested it out myself, and even playing co-op with someone would be fun to do. Now, it's not my favorite thing to do, but you have to give it credit in terms of how they're able to get that online multiplayer in there and make a better experience for the gamers out there, in addition to adding in content, cleaning up the visuals a bit more, getting rid of some of the stuff that didn't need to be there for better playability. Super Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury is a very compelling package. One of the big reasons why it sold another 10 million plus on the Nintendo Switch, despite already selling decently on the Wii U, considering the install base. People were chomping at the bit to be able to play that, and Nintendo delivered when it comes to the quality of the game. So number 6, absolutely deserving, is Super Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury. Coming in at number 5 is Metroid Prime Remastered. This game is phenomenal. This is a GameCube game, then to Wii game, so I'm thinking that this is probably the Wii version of the game ported over to the Nintendo Switch, or maybe it could be the GameCube version. Either way, it's got all of the options. It's got the IR pointing, aiming, which necessarily isn't that great or better than the Wii version of the game, but it's an option for you. You've got the Pro Controller gameplay, which is absolutely great because the Wii version had no Pro Controller gameplay, so it's really good that they have that option in there, in addition to having other options within it to where you can control it like a dual analog shooter, which was never available for any versions of the game. So that already makes it better, in my opinion, because it gives you every simulated style of control. You want to play it like the original GameCube version, you can. You want to play it like the Wii version of the game, you can try. You want to play it like a dual analog shooter that you're used to, you can as well, in all glorious 1080p, 60 frames per second, and visuals that rival, because of the art and because of them going in and fine-tuning and kind of retexturing and remaking things, rival a lot of the best looking games on the Nintendo Switch, and just best looking games, period. That's how you know that you have a timeless classic overall, and a super rock solid port. Frame rate delivers, no problems whatsoever. Loading times way faster than the original. Everything is sharp, on point, looks great, it has great effects. The fog, the visor, all of that stuff is intact. Now, it would have been great if they added in like an autosave feature, but maybe they wanted to keep it completely, the game in terms of how the structure was and how saving works and all that. But that would have been nice, maybe a bit higher on the list. But I think the port overall is still incredibly solid and easily could have been higher up than a lot of the games, outside of the fact that it is a GameCube game, it is a Wii game, so it's not as impressive considering what they needed to do, but it's still incredibly good. It's so high up on the list here. Fantastic what they were able to do. Coming in at number 4, Nier Automata, the End of Yura Edition. Easily one of the most impressive Japanese RPG ports on the system, hands down. It's got all of the content and a little bit more content that they added in. That is key. The frame rate isn't crazy all the time. Remember, this is an open-ended, open world style of game. The image quality is actually higher resolution than the PlayStation 4 version. That is called optimization. Now, the frame rate doesn't hit the 60 frames. That's uneven or unstable, but it doesn't hit that. It's 30 frames with some dips, especially in some areas, but most of the time it runs at a solid 30 frames per second, which nobody would have even thought of or expected. When you saw Nier Automata, people have been asking for it pretty much all generation on Switch, and I'm like, how? Why? How are they going to get that? It's going to run not good, but not so much. it runs good. It runs good enough. It looks good. It's solid. It's a solid part of the game with great content and everything added in there. And that's one of the big things when I talk about this. I've mentioned it so many times. The content, the quality, the scope, the scale, everything's factoring into how I feel in terms of the best AAA ports. I factor everything in, and Nier Automata is easily a top 5 in my book. So I had to give it that, and honestly, could have been higher, all things considered. Next up at number 3, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. This is a port of the Wii U game, but have they blown this whole thing up? It almost feels like a whole new game. They added in so many different things. The battle mode was completely revamped to actually be good. You have the 2 items instead of 1 item. They increased the resolution to 1080p. They fixed the little frame in pacing, the 59 frames per second thing, got that locked in at 60. They fixed some of the tournament stuff. They added in the ability for private custom matches to where you can pick whatever item set that you want to pick. They improved the lobbies. They added the ability to change the different carts and wheels and everything there. The online play, the point system has been scaled better. They added a ton of courses for you to race in. This is the superior port when it comes to Nintendo Switch first-party games. That's the reason why, honestly, it's the best-selling first-party game. Best-selling game on the Nintendo Switch is easily because of everything that I just stated here. It runs flawless, it looks flawless, it's still one of the best looking games I think on any platform when it comes to the style of game, the cartoony type of style. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe fits every single thing that you would want to see. The gameplay is smooth, the input delay is very minimal, the controls are great. Everything is just awesome in this game. Now, there's some little quirks here and there with the quality of the game in terms of how you feel about certain racing aspects and mechanics, but overall, in terms of how it is as a port and all the different levels that we've been gauging or judging on, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is just as high, but it's still insanely good, and that's why it's number 3 on the list. Coming in at number 2, Batman Arkham City. We're not talking about the Batman trilogy. Skip that. Arkham Asylum, you can throw that away. I mean, it's an okay game, but you can throw that away when it comes to certain things. When you look at Batman Arkham Knight, you can bury that game and never bring it out until they fix it, which I don't think that they will. The game that I'm focusing on, even though you can't buy the game separately, but I'm just simply saying if you're gonna get this trilogy, you're gonna get it for this game, and that is Batman Arkham City. It's a fantastic port. All of the content. They even added in the extra Batsuit from the newest movie. So they got all of that. It's got so many of the different combat challenges and the DLCs all included, all intact. No problem there. No cutting of content like we've seen with some of the games that didn't make this list. Visually speaking, from a image clarity, from a resolution, it's not the best, but it's very similar to the port from what we've seen from the PC version and what you can compare on Xbox and PlayStation. Now, it doesn't reach the heights of what you can see on like the PS5 backwards compatibility with the PS4 or Xbox One X or anything like that, but it's still somewhat comparable. Like, it's not too far off. It looks really good and it runs really good too. It actually runs better despite it being a bigger game, more complex. It runs better than Batman Arkham Asylum on the Nintendo Switch, and that's probably because it's a bit newer, better optimized game overall, using that same Unreal Engine 3 and everything. And for the Nintendo Switch to have a fantastic version of one of the best third-party games ever, one of the best superhero games. It's my favorite superhero game ever. I think that is a big reason why it's so high up. From a technical aspect, comparing it to PS3 360 or even PS4, it is really good. And then also from the gameplay aspect, it's there, but it doesn't look bad in portable mode. It has dynamic resolution, so the frame rate is going to hold steady even in the open world. It's not all choppy or anything like that. I cannot say enough good things about the job that was done on Batman Arkham City. It's almost as if they knew that that's the only game that we're going to want to play on on the Nintendo Switch, especially with that seizure-inducing detective mode that Batman Arkham Asylum has. I just couldn't even play that game anymore. But yes, Batman Arkham City, the challenge maps, the extra DLC, the Harley Quinn stuff, everything that it has, it's well worth the investment if you can find it on sale or if they would allow you to buy it individually, but it's already going on sale for 30-40 bucks. I think it's worth it if you have never played the game before. This is easily one of the best superhero games, one of the best games ever made. it deserves that number 2 spot on the list. And coming in at number 1, Persona 5 Royal. Now, admittedly, there are a few flaws with this one when it comes to the image clarity, when it comes to the resolution, not quite that 1080p that I think that it should be. It's a bit lower than that. Portable mode, 540, not necessarily as good as I think it should be. However, if you consider everything with this, the quality of it compared to other JRPGs, but if you consider everything, the quality of the game, one, in addition to exactly how good it looks because of the art style, and the biggest thing here, how it runs. Persona 5 Royal to me is the best. You've got all that extra content that's been brought over. Nothing was cut, but then it runs at the rock solid 30 frames per second. So if you look at it, content all there. The graphics look great, very comparable to the PS4 version of the game overall. Still a little bit fuzzy in some areas, but the way that it runs. Yes, it's a turn-based RPG, but we've seen turn-based RPGs sometimes have issues. And yes, it's not the most complex game, but once again, the quality of the game shines through with what they were able to do overall with how good the game runs. So you're not going to be sitting there and saying, oh, there's some frame rate drops here or there, or it doesn't look really good. It's going to look great in motion, and part of it is the eye test as well. When I play it on my Nintendo Switch OLED, when I play it on my TV, it looks and animates fantastic. Now, there are maybe some little oddities here and there overall that I caught, but ever since I've been playing it, it's just been a dream. I've played it so much on the Nintendo Switch, and the quality of the game just shines through as easily one of the best. This is one of the best games out there, and I think that they did a great job with the port. Not necessarily the best that they could have done, but everything, I think that it stacks up just as high as pretty much any of the other games on this list, if not higher. So, what are your thoughts on all this, guys? We have went through the top 25 best AAA ports on the Nintendo Switch here. What are some of the games that you think should have been on the list? Let me know in the comment section below. All right, guys, that wraps it up for this video here. Thank you so much for watching. I do appreciate it. Please make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you're someone new, click that notification bell, and check out my other Nintendo Switch top 25 lists right here on screen. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you guys for the next one. Peace.